Bicycle Day Suckerpunch, an LSD and cannabis trip report by Espresso, posted to earwid.org May 6, 2021. Last night, April 19th, 2021, was a very foreign experience. After receiving 2 small white tabs of blotter from a new friend, supposedly straight from Austin, Texas, I realised that the next day would be Bicycle Day. I hadn't taken any LSD for over 6 months, and was very eager to celebrate 419 authentically for the very first time. I kept in mind that the LSD I had just purchased didn't have a known dosage along with it, simply in my new friend's anecdotal, "This acid don't play." I'd decided to wait until noon to dose, so that I could finish online work for school early. I nearly couldn't sleep the night before in excitement. Noon rolled around, and I placed 1 blotter under the tongue carefully. About 1 hour and 20 minutes after noon, I was finally rolling along. An almost identical experience to the notorious gel tabs I'd partook in last year. It was definitely good acid, giddy, euphoric, and very comfortably manageable. I was simply under the impression that it was a small amount, most likely 50 to 100 micrograms, being such a small blotter. I can ramble on about the minutiae of a moderate dose of LSD and its fantastic effects, but with the sheer amount of experiences available, I can wholeheartedly say I would be redundant in rehashing what thousands have said already. I came to the conclusion that the blotters were simply average, and I was receiving all that I would from 1 tab. I was dead wrong. Nearly about 6 or 7 hours after I'd truthfully accepted that the trip was over, I was only observing faint, almost indiscriminate open-eye visuals. I was oily and felt like I'd been through the ringer, as many will describe the come-down. Then, a close friend texted me, asking if I wanted to try her cannabis cartridge she just bought. I told her, "Oh, absolutely, it'd be really nice to cool down after today." I park, we visit, we pass the cartridge back and forth about 8 to 10 times, and I'm beginning to relax. Cannabis is great on the tail end of getting fucked up, but I was not prepared in the slightest for the following 3 hours. The geometry was creeping back gently. It was identical to countless stereotypical video replications provided by the internet. I told her, "Fuck, I'm still tripping hard. This is great though. Get to ride the roller coaster again." We said our goodbyes and good lucks, and I trudged off to my truck. Earwid note: driving while intoxicated, tripping, or extremely sleep deprived is dangerous and irresponsible because it endangers other people. Don't do it. So I then carefully drove home, parked, and enjoyed my tripping self. My experience had doubled since the peak around 4 PM, in the span of 40 minutes. I was ecstatic and, frankly, in the best mindset possible. I was then tasked with accompanying my mother with her evening walk. Mind you, it was windy and quite chilly yesterday, so while we walked and visited, my responses in conversation were perfectly coherent, but limited. A gorgeous orangey-purple hue filled the late evening sky. Houses rippled on the horizon, and I was enjoying it intensely. I did not venture into beginning any talking points to my mother. I simply provided simple responses to her in lieu of my condition. The wind felt like I had formed freezer burns on my forearms and legs. We both decided to head to our home, since I was wearing shorts and a button-up shirt. She would circle our cul-de-sac, and she would finish her walk after I returned outside with her jacket. I sat down inside my room, I grabbed my jacket, and noticed I am still very intoxicated, and then forget my current task. Well, I did not return outside. I simply could not. I found myself being propelled into a full speed of blistering fits of hallucinations, palpitations, sweating, and an unfathomable unravelling of the very constitution of the reality around me. Had my mother decided to enter the house and confront me for making her walk the block, apparently 6 times, waiting for me to return with a jacket, I might have been babbling as incoherently as a sea lion. I wish I could describe with much more concise language. I truly wish I had the vocabulary to describe the opening ceremony that unfolded before me. I had a slippery, intangible sense of horror, pure adrenaline-fueled terror. The acid had begun this rampant, thought-looping, and fascinating display of intense visual aberration. Nearly touchable 3-dimensional geometry filled my plane of view. As I peered around my room was still there, but I was not perceiving what truly was occurring. The lamp and digital clock were beaming with an orangey flame, like an acetylene torch with too much oxygen. Some objects had streaming halls of mirrors behind them. Edges of objects began to ripple and shift with as much vigour as they were made of smoke, transfixed into these shapes of items I hold very dear to my reality. Suddenly, therein lay the punch. I'd been bitch-slapped back into the purest, most visceral hallucinations I have ever experienced. Some part of me wanted to Google if cannabis actually could have just sent me into this hellscape I was now in, 8 to 9 hours after initial dose. I was certain I hadn't just been dosed with something foreign in the cartridge. It was just good-ass cannabis oil. Shifting in and out of my reality, observing changes in hue, texture and tangibility, and experiencing a tunnel vision which occurred intermittently, piercing into another plane of reality, like a fish bursting out of the water to be suddenly cast into an entirely foreign environment. My inner monologue was scraping to remain intact, and I gladfully was competently able to stay composed, well, at least physically. The only fear that remained was lingering mildly, that which I had slayed already. I was afloat upon tumultuous waves of perception, surfing you might say. I could transverse this experience, paddle along, and remind myself that my reality was here. Here is my plane of existence, and I will be coming down soon. I'll be just fine, I guess. Gradually, I was returned to normalcy. At about 11:36, 11 hours and 36 minutes since initial dose, I had regained my chokehold on reality again. What I had experienced was the immediate issue of concern, so I pounced on my computer. What came to my realization was I had undergone the tail end of an acid trip sent into overdrive in the last few hours possible, pushing my previously solid mental limit of conceptualization. This acid took that limit, chewed it up, and spat it the fuck out. It only took 20 minutes of reading within the difficult LSD experiences on Erowid. They were describing what has been identified as LSD-induced ego death. I immediately related every single small detail of personal disintegration from reality that I had just experienced. I couldn't recall my life, my only reality. I only knew I was observing something in the eyes of some vessel much less personal, much more spiritual. Then, in a tongue-in-cheek sort of fashion, decided to listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, before eventually succumbing to sleep around 12:20 AM this morning, enjoying some faint closed-eye visuals during this period. Well, here I am now, perfectly fine on April 20th, 2021, feeling rather refreshed and rested, despite the horrible experience. I got to celebrate Bicycle Day 2021 in the most existentially shattering way possible, and I now have a newfound understanding, respect, and admiration for those who truly see the benefit in these substances. So, happy Bicycle Day everyone, not to be confused with the United Nations designated World Bicycle Day. So, on April 19th, 1943, our good friend Albert Hofmann ingested 250 micrograms of LSD and had what would be considered the first intentional acid trip. Obviously, a lot of people around the globe will celebrate this by consuming LSD, and if you're one of them people, just remember to be safe, wise, and treat this stuff with the respect it deserves. Well, I know you guys who are serious about this stuff don't need to be told that because you've already got your head screwed on. I don't know if many people know this, but actually Hoffman's trip wasn't the beautiful, euphoric, spiritual experience that is possible for LSD. Actually, on his way home, I believed he started alternating through feelings of anxiety and terror. He actually believed that his next door neighbour was a witch and that the LSD had actually poisoned him. So he actually got the doctor to come round. Obviously, the doctor found no physical abnormalities other than his very dilated pupils. So after this, Hoffman began to come back around, and the trip took a beautiful, positive turn, to which he later wrote, "Little by little, I could begin to enjoy the unprecedented colours and plays of shapes that persisted behind my closed eyes. Kaleidoscopic, fantastic images surged in on me, alternating, variegated, opening and then closing themselves in circles and spirals, exploding in coloured fountains, rearranging and hybridizing themselves in constant flux. So yeah, really interesting. And actually, the celebration of Bicycle Day, I didn't know this, originated in DeKalb, Illinois in 1985 when Thomas B. Roberts, a professor at Northern Illinois University, invented the name. Yeah, it's really interesting that. Obviously, it's really worth looking into in your own time. Yeah, I can tell you all this stuff, but the beauty of reading into these things yourself is that it absorbs better. And yeah, if you take an interest in this sort of stuff, it's very enjoyable to read about the cultural, historical significance of the consumption of these substances, specifically LSD, within the cultural framework of the world. Very influential. And funnily enough, it's 420 tomorrow as well. A beautiful little coincidence, that, isn't it? Just one thing I'd say about this trip report. Obviously, we're getting back into broken record territory again, but I've said many times that consuming cannabis on an LSD trip, especially during the peak, or at any point during it, is like playing with a loaded gun. This guy thought he was safe taking it in the tail end of the experience. I mean, in a sense, it turned out alright for him, but that doesn't negate the fact that, yeah, when you experience an ego death propelled by cannabis in the fashion that this person did, it can be more chaotic and paranoia-inducing than it could be otherwise if you just had LSD by itself. So yes, it's something that I definitely urge serious caution with. I've had some horrendous experiences mixing the two, and I don't really think I want to mess about with that anymore. So yep, just bear in mind that cannabis really can skyrocket these experiences. Yeah, really was an apt name for the trip report, being sucker punched by it, because that's honestly what it feels like. And you obviously go into thinking, oh yeah, it's relaxed me, and then before you know it, it can take a very intense, extreme turn, and if it gets you by surprise and you're in that sort of impressionable state, it can be quite terrifying. So yeah, make sure you look after yourselves this weekend, boys and girls, and don't do anything I wouldn't do. So I'll see you on the other side. Hasta la vista, baby.